Imagine what it would feel like to be a Gilded Age heiress. Your very movements choreographed by centuries of social expectation. For Dorothy Arnold, each day began with the weight of the Arnold name, a name that opened every door in Manhattan society, while simultaneously closing others. Her life was a parade of exquisite moments. Shopping expeditions down Fifth Avenue, literary pursuits at prestigious schools, and secret romantic correspondences to suitors delivered on expensive stationery. Indeed, she played her part perfectly, floating through high society in velvet hats adorned with silk roses, her black fox muff keeping her gloved hands warm as she stepped into luxury shops where even the air seemed perfumed with privilege. Yet beneath this carefully maintained facade of wealth and propriety lay the stirrings of rebellion, of dreams that couldn't be bought, dreams that would lead her toward a destiny no one could have predicted on that fateful December afternoon in 1910. In today's episode, we'll share the enduring mystery of her disappearance, from the facts of the case to the wildest of theories, as we describe. The Gilded Age heiress who disappeared, the mystery of Dorothy Arnold. In the grand mansions of Gilded Age New York, where gaslight cast long shadows across marble floors and secrets whispered behind silk fans, Dorothy Arnold was born into a world where everything had its price, but true freedom remained beyond purchase. The second of 4 children, she emerged into life on the 1st of July 1885, destined to bear the weight of the Arnold name, a name that opened every door in Manhattan society, yet somehow managed to close just as many around her. And her father, Francis R. Arnold, had built his fortune on the delicate scents of imported perfumes, those invisible tendrils of luxury that wrapped themselves around the necks of society's finest ladies. From his offices at F.R. Arnold & Co., he crafted not merely a business, but a dynasty, one that reached its marble-clad fingers all the way to the Supreme Court through Dorothy's aunt's marriage to Justice Rufus W. Peckham. In fact, the Arnolds could trace their blood back to the Mayflower itself, old money mixing with new in that peculiarly American alchemy that defined the age. And the family mansion at 108 East 79th Street stood as a monument to their ascension, its rooms filled with the heavy breath of wealth, mahogany panels that had crossed oceans to line their walls, Persian carpets that muffled the sound of servants' footsteps, crystal chandeliers that caught and multiplied the light until it seemed the very air sparkled with privilege. Yet within these gilded walls, Dorothy felt the increasing weight of expectations pressing against her chest like a too-tight corset. At the Veltin School for Girls, she learned to move through society like a queen, her chin held at precisely the right angle to suggest both breeding and approachability. And at Bryn Mawr, she dared to dream of something more. Literature and language opened doors to worlds beyond the suffocating parlours of Fifth Avenue. She began to write, pouring her soul onto paper in secret moments between social obligations. But when her stories returned with rejection letters, her family's amusement cut deeper than any editor's criticism. Still, she persisted. In the autumn of 1910, Dorothy began spending more time alone, making mysterious trips downtown. Her father's refusal to let her move to Greenwich Village, that bohemian refuge of artists and intellectuals, only strengthened her resolve. No one who saw her on a crisp December day shortly thereafter could have known that, as she walked away from a candy shop, each click of her heels on the sidewalk was counting down to one of the most baffling disappearances in New York history. The morning of the 12th of December 1910 dawned cold and clear in Manhattan, the kind of crystalline winter day when footsteps echo sharply off brownstone facades and even the air seems to hold its breath. Dorothy Arnold emerged from the family mansion at 108 East 79th Street, wearing a tailored blue suit that whispered of wealth with every movement. Her black velvet hat, adorned with silk roses the colour of twilight, cast delicate shadows across her face, shadows that would soon become permanent in the photographs plastered across newspapers nationwide. In her leather purse lay $25 in crisp bills, a fortune to most at the time, but mere pocket money to an Arnold. The money nestled beside a letter, its contents known only to Dorothy, the paper worn at its creases from repeated reading. This was not the first such letter. Others had arrived over the preceding months, each one bearing a Boston postmark and the distinctive handwriting of George Griscom Jr., whose very name made Frances Arnold's jaw tighten with disapproval. The streets of Manhattan stretched before her that morning, like the chapters of an unwritten novel. Fifth Avenue glittered with promise, its shop windows displaying treasures that Dorothy barely noticed as she made her way south. At Park and Tilford, she purchased a box of chocolates, the kind she had always favoured, wrapped in paper that crinkled with elegant restraint. The sound would echo in the memory of the shop girl who served her, becoming part of the tapestry of last moments that investigators would later weave together. At Brentano's bookstore, the warmth of literary sanctuary embraced her. Here, among the leather-bound volumes and fresh ink, Dorothy selected engaged girl sketches, a choice that would later be dissected for hidden meaning by dozens of detectives. The book's pages held stories of love and marriage, subjects that had become increasingly complicated in Dorothy's own life since her secret meetings with Griscom in Boston. As she left the bookstore, Manhattan's winter light was already beginning to fade, though it was not yet afternoon. Dorothy's figure, elegant in blue, merged with the crowd of holiday shoppers. She moved toward Central Park, where bare trees reached toward a steel-grey sky like grasping fingers. The park's winding paths offered silent witness to countless clandestine meetings and whispered promises, but whatever secrets they might have held about Dorothy's fate remained locked in winter's frozen embrace. Back at the mansion, the hours began their inexorable march toward evening. The family's dinner hour approached with its usual precision, silver being laid, wine being decanted, servants moving with practiced efficiency through rooms growing steadily darker. But Dorothy's chair would remain empty, her absence at first a mere ripple in the carefully orchestrated rhythm of upper-class life. That ripple would soon become a wave, threatening to overwhelm the carefully constructed facade of Arnold family propriety. For as the evening shadows lengthened across Fifth Avenue's fashionable flagstones, Dorothy Arnold, heiress, aspiring writer, secret romantic, had already stepped into a mystery that would haunt New York society for generations to come. For 6 weeks after Dorothy Arnold vanished, silence wrapped itself around the Arnold mansion like winter fog. Behind heavy curtains and massive oak doors, the family's private agony played out in whispered conversations and furtive meetings with John S. Keith, their trusted lawyer, whose discreet inquiries had yielded nothing but shadows. The family's pride, that great fortress built of old money and older connections, had become their prison. Frances Arnold, who had built an empire on imported perfumes and social connections, found himself facing an enemy that neither wealth nor influence could defeat. Each morning he descended the mansion's marble staircase with ever greyer features, the weight of his decision to protect the family name bearing down upon him with the inexorable force of approaching disaster. The servants moved through the house like ghosts, careful to avert their eyes from empty chairs and untouched place settings. Mary Martha Arnold maintained her social calendar with mechanical precision, each tea party and charity meeting a masterclass in composed desperation. Behind her perfect smile lay the growing certainty that every passing hour without police involvement pushed her daughter further beyond reach. Yet the spectre of scandal, that great destroyer of Gilded Age fortunes, kept her lips sealed and her gloved hands folded properly in her lap. When they finally broke their silence on the 25th of January 1911, the press descended like vultures on fresh prey. The Arnold mansion became the epicenter of a media earthquake that sent shockwaves through every drawing room from Fifth Avenue to Newport. Reporters prowled the sidewalks, their pencils sharp as knives, ready to carve the family's reputation into headlines that would sell papers from coast to coast. The press conference, held in the very parlour where Dorothy had last bid goodbye to her mother, transformed their private nightmare into public theatre. Frances Arnold stood before the flashbulbs, his dignity crumbling like ancient marble as he offered $1,000 for information about his daughter's whereabouts, a sum that seemed paltry against the $100,000 he would eventually spend chasing shadows. Across the nation, Dorothy's face stared out from newspaper pages and police circulars, her story feeding America's growing appetite for mystery and tragedy among the privileged classes. From Philadelphia's railway stations to San Antonio's dusty streets, reported sightings bloomed like desert flowers after rain, beautiful, brief, and ultimately false. The Pinkerton detectives, those shadows among shadows, followed countless leads that dissolved into nothing. Ransom notes arrived. each one raising hopes only to dash them against the rocks of deception. Even Joseph P.K. Leonard's lurid confession of witnessing Dorothy's demise proved to be nothing more than the fabrication of a desperate mind. But perhaps most telling was what remained in Dorothy's room, untouched since that December morning. Her evening clothes, her jewellery, her diary filled with secrets about George Griscom Jr., all the precious detritus of a life interrupted. And there on her writing desk lay a half-finished manuscript, its pages forever waiting for an ending that would never come. Time moves forward with relentless precision, but some mysteries refuse to fade into history's shadows. In the decades following Dorothy Arnold's disappearance, theories bloomed like dark flowers in the garden of public imagination, each one reaching toward its own version of truth. The ransom notes arrived like poison pen letters, demanding $5,000 for Dorothy's return, a paltry sum for an Arnold, yet still too much for truth. These missives, scrawled by opportunists who sought to profit from a family's desperation, only deepened the mystery they pretended to solve. Each fraudulent demand drove another nail into the coffin of the kidnapping theory, until it lay buried beneath the weight of its own improbability. In the marble-floored parlours of New York society, whispers of suicide drifted like perfume through the air. Those who knew Dorothy spoke of her rejected manuscripts, those paper children she had sent into the world only to have them return unwanted. They mentioned the weight of expectations that had pressed upon her shoulders, heavier than any fur coat she had ever worn. Some pointed to her letters to George Griscom Jr., where disappointment bled through the ink, like a wound that wouldn't heal. Griscom himself became both suspect and theorist, his week with Dorothy in Boston, a chapter that society matrons read between the lines with raised eyebrows and knowing glances. He spoke of her despondency over her failed literary ambitions, of dark hints in her correspondence that suggested an ending she might have written herself. Yet no body was ever found in Central Park's winter bare landscape. No unidentified woman matched her description in any of Manhattan's morgues. The elopement theory gained traction in certain circles, fueled by Dorothy's secret Boston rendezvous and her family's iron-fisted control over her life. Some imagined her on a steamer bound for Europe, her tailored blue suit exchanged for a new identity, her black fox muff traded for the warm embrace of freedom. But this romantic notion, like all the others, dissolved under the harsh light of investigation. As the years passed, Dorothy Arnold's disappearance became more than just another society scandal. It emerged as a dark mirror reflecting the anxieties of an age. In her story, the public found every fear that haunted the Gilded Age: the vulnerability of wealth, the price of rebellion against social constraints, the thin veneer of security that separated the highest echelons of society from the abyss of uncertainty. Francis Arnold went to his grave in 1922, believing his daughter had ended her own life, taking with him whatever secrets he might have held about those 6 weeks of silence. Mary Martha Arnold followed in 1928, her final years marked by the daily ritual of watching her front door, waiting for a return that never came. The case files gathered dust in police archives, their pages yellowing like autumn leaves. Yet Dorothy Arnold's disappearance refused to be relegated to history's footnotes. Her story continues to whisper through time, a reminder that even in an age when wealth could buy almost anything, some questions remained forever beyond purchase, some mysteries eternally unsolved. And now we'd like to see you in the comments. Had you heard of the Dorothy Arnold mystery before, and what do you think happened to her? We can't wait to hear from you, and thanks for joining us. Cheers until next time.